You will always face disappointments, but if you have the character to keep going, you can keep striving. Young people today have more opportunities. Eleanor Roosevelt lost her mother, brother, and father before she was 11, and that childhood tragedy was only the beginning. By the time she died in 1962 at age 78, she had survived betrayals and losses that would have destroyed many people: her husband's affair, her daughter's secret that hurt her deeply, and a private relationship she kept hidden for decades. When her personal journals were published, they revealed how lonely and troubled she often felt. The woman who fought for human rights was also fighting a private war no one saw. She was born on October 11, 1884, in New York City and named Anna Eleanor Roosevelt. Her father, Elliot Roosevelt, was the younger brother of Theodore Roosevelt, and her mother, Anna Hall Roosevelt, was proud of her own beauty but never praised Eleanor. Her mother mocked Eleanor, called her Granny, and reminded her that she was plain. As a child, Eleanor learned to hide her feelings. Her father was charming but deeply troubled by alcohol. He would disappear for days and sometimes come back trembling. Her mother had terrible migraines, and young Eleanor, barely 4, would sit beside her and read aloud for hours to help. In December 1892, when Eleanor was 8, her mother died of diphtheria. She remembered the soft goodbye and the long, cold nights that followed. A few months later, in May 1893, her younger brother Elliot Jr. died of scarlet fever at age 4, and Eleanor quietly carried the guilt she felt for the rest of her life. Then in August 1894 her father jumped from a window. He died after a seizure at 34, though people were told it was heart disease. Before she turned 11, Eleanor had buried her mother, her brother, and her father, and her childhood was gone. She and her surviving brother Hall went to live with their grandmother, Mary Livingston Hall, in Tivoli, New York. The house was large but strict. Her grandmother ran it with stiff rules and high expectations. Eleanor wore uncomfortable braces to straighten her back, dressed in clothes that made her feel awkward, and learned to be solemn and quiet. Even so, that household offered a measure of safety, food, shelter, and order. In 1899 she was sent to a girls' school in England, Allenswood, where the headmistress, Marie Sylvester, opened Eleanor's mind. Marie challenged her to think, to feel, and to act. They walked through factories, poor neighborhoods, and art galleries. Eleanor learned about the lives of the poor, learned French, and changed. Marie became the first person who truly understood and supported her, and when Marie died in 1905 Eleanor kept her letters close for life. Returning to New York in 1902, Eleanor did not fit in with the ballroom society where people judged dress, speech, and posture. While others danced and drank champagne, she volunteered in the immigrant slums of the Lower East Side, teaching dance to shoeless children and walking into overcrowded, sick rooms. She felt more alive there than at any tea party and wrote about the families she met, wanting to listen and help. Her uncle became president in 1901, and public life brought pressure. In 1902 she had her formal debut in the White House and hated the gowns, whispers, and pressure to marry well. On March 17, 1905, she married Franklin D. Roosevelt at her grandmother's house, escorted by President Theodore Roosevelt. The marriage joined two prominent families but came with a cost. Franklin's mother, Sarah Delano Roosevelt, intruded constantly, built a connected townhouse, and often told the children Eleanor wasn't their real mother, which cut deeply. In 1916 Eleanor discovered Franklin's affair with Lucy Mercer when she found hidden letters. She offered a divorce but Franklin, under pressure from advisors and his mother, refused, and their marriage became more of a political partnership than a romantic relationship. In 1909 Eleanor lost her first son, Franklin Jr., to influenza at 8 months old. The loss plunged her into deep depression and revived the pain of earlier losses. In 1945 Franklin died at Warm Springs. Eleanor was not with him, and she learned that Lucy Mercer had been at his side, an additional betrayal carried out with the knowledge of their daughter Anna. This caused a lasting silence between Eleanor and Anna. In 1917 Eleanor left the comfort of privilege and volunteered with the Red Cross in World War I, driving ambulances in France for long shifts while bombs fell. She loaded wounded soldiers, some barely older than her own children, and witnessed horrors that left a deep, lasting hatred of war in her heart. After the war, women won the vote in 1920 and Eleanor joined the League of Women Voters, but she did more than attend meetings. She went into crowded immigrant neighborhoods, found women afraid to register, brought lawyers, started night classes to teach voting rights, and opened basements where women could meet safely. She kept showing up until thousands who had been silent stood in line to vote. From 1924 to 1933 she taught at the Todhunter School for Girls, using photos of child factory workers to make students feel the issue of child labor and inviting labor activists into class so her students left with a conscience, not just a diploma. Earlier she had worked in a settlement house on the Lower East Side, teaching dance and English to immigrant children and secretly bringing food and medicine from her own allowance. Her mother-in-law called it slumming, but Eleanor ignored that and helped families directly, buying coats, bringing doctors, and aiding abused women. In 1926 she met journalist Lena Hickok, Hick, and their letters, later numbering over 3,000, showed great closeness and comfort. Eleanor poured her loneliness into those letters. Hick sometimes helped her financially when she was ill or traveling. In 1925 Eleanor began writing for the Women's Democratic News and went underground into coal mines to report on black lung disease and unsafe conditions. Her reporting helped push safety reforms that later became law. In 1933 she launched a daily column, My Day, visiting soup kitchens and bread lines and using her salary for charity. By 1936 the column reached 4 million readers and helped open job centers and emergency funds. During Franklin's 1928 run for governor she drove a Model T across New York, giving 150 speeches and telling hard truths about abuse and poverty, bold talks that many found dangerous but that helped get women to vote and act. In 1932 she wrote When You Ask Why, which recounted her activism and encouraged women's participation. She had been arrested in 1919 while campaigning for the League of Nations, and she kept pushing for democracy and women's roles in it. By 1929 she used radio to report on the Dust Bowl and the suffering of families and helped push federal aid and programs like the Resettlement Administration. Starting March 6, 1933, she began holding women-only press conferences, eventually hosting 348 of them over 12 years. Giving female reporters access and pushing them to ask about pay and civil rights. Her insistence led to women being hired as White House correspondents. In 1935 she helped start the National Youth Administration, visiting camps and fighting for job training, school aid, and mental health programs that helped over 2 million young people. During debates over the Fair Labor Standards Act she read names and faces of child laborers to Congress. The law passed on October 24, 1938, banning child labor and creating a federal minimum wage. She also supported the Federal Art Project, defending art that confronted lynching and racial injustice and helping thousands of artists find work. In places like Arthurdale, West Virginia, she demanded real housing, plumbing, and heat, not just photo opportunities, and by 1934 hundreds of new homes were built. During World War II she toured munitions factories and exposed dangerous conditions that caused miscarriages, forcing improvements. She visited USO camps and danced with black soldiers at segregated bases, calling segregation un-American and shifting public opinion. In 1943 she visited Manzanar, an internment camp for Japanese Americans, called the conditions inhumane, and pressed Franklin to speed releases. In 1944 she fought to include women veterans in the GI Bill, testifying for women who had served but were denied benefits. After the war, in December 1945, President Truman appointed her as the U.S. delegate to the United Nations, and she soon became chair of the UN Commission on Human Rights. At a time when the world was divided, she pushed to include economic rights, food, shelter, medical care, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, using photographs and first-hand stories of famine and suffering to make delegates understand the real meaning of rights. In 1946 she toured devastated Europe, carrying urgent numbers and images into the Declaration. Her insistence helped write Article 25 so the Declaration named necessities that save lives. When she arrived in Paris in 1947 she wore the same plain blue suit every day to show she was not there to impress but to make a point. Her calm persistence helped secure equal rights language in the text, and after 81 debates the Declaration was adopted on December 10, 1948, with 48 votes in favor and 8 abstentions. After that, she traveled widely. In India she spoke against caste discrimination despite threats, using her name to protect local activists. In 1952 she left the UN in protest over the Korean War and turned to the civil rights struggle at home, joining civil rights efforts, touring segregated schools, funding lawsuits, and supporting cases like Brown versus Board of Education. She helped form Americans for Democratic Action, fought McCarthyism, defended blacklisted artists and writers, and reminded the public what real tyranny looked like. In 1961 President John F. Kennedy asked her to chair the new Commission on the Status of Women. At 77 she accepted, fought for equal pay, and helped shape policies like the Equal Pay Act of 1963. She kept speaking up, sometimes 150 times a year, and in 1958 she visited South Africa after the Sharpeville massacre and later secretly helped exiles. In 1961 she rejoined the U.S. delegation for a visit to Moscow, collapsed from anemia but recovered enough to challenge Soviet leaders about American segregation, and returned home while her words continued to resonate. In 1962 doctors diagnosed her with Hodgkin's lymphoma, but she kept writing My Day from her hospital bed and used her final pieces to argue for nuclear disarmament after seeing the horrors of Hiroshima. Eleanor Roosevelt died on November 7, 1962, in New York at 78. More than 10,000 people mourned at her funeral at the United Nations, and leaders and ordinary people alike recognized her global impact. Her journals, published after her death, showed the private struggles, loneliness, betrayal, and depression that she faced while still carrying on her public work. Decades later she was honored on a U.S. quarter, and young people continued to find inspiration in her words, proving that Eleanor Roosevelt did not only believe in a better world, she helped build the road to it and kept walking it every day.